Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Well, I think I'm doing better than you this week. You have come down with a bit of a cold, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the flu or a cold, but my son got sick about a week ago and kept him home from daycare for a few days and took a few days off work to look after him. And of course, when you do that, you're likely to pick up whatever the kid brought home. So yeah, I've been battling some symptoms since probably Sunday, and I feel like I'm on the mend, but I definitely have lost a bit of my voice today. So I apologize to listeners, but I'll try to project as much as I can.
If you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, the question I always like to ask, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional level. We talk about the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional teams.
This week's topics are going to include Cavalry FC. We'll talk about their draw against Ottawa last weekend and their upcoming big match against York United on Friday evening. And we're going to talk some post-secondary soccer and, U Sports and SAIT. And that ties into our interview guest this week. Eh, Scott?
It does, yeah. We caught up earlier today with Aislin Phillips, who is a midfielder for the University of Calgary Dinos. She's from the area. She grew up in Cochrane, but she's actually a new addition to the Dinos. She spent her first 3 years of post-secondary eligibility with the UBC Thunderbirds and had a lot of success with that program, but has returned home and is playing for a coach that she has known for quite some time.
Yeah, Diogo Raposo, a well-known guest on this podcast for sure. So yeah, we'll get to that in a little while. One other topic we're going to have some fun with, I think, a little bit later on is, I think we're going to start to see signings in the Northern Super League pretty soon. And so we thought it might be fun to kind of toss around some names of the Calgarians we think that are the most likely players to get a shot. So we'll talk about that in a little while, but for now, let's start off with Cavalry FC.
This is Dan Klum, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So Atletico Ottawa came to town last weekend for their last trip to Calgary of the 2024 season. Jason, I wasn't too surprised with the final outcome of this one. These two teams have been neck and neck whenever they faced each other this year, apart from one match, of course. 2-2 draw, meaning that Cavalry went for a third game in a row without a win.
Yeah, and I think watching the match, a draw was about right. They were pretty evenly matched overall. It was an exciting match to watch, a bunch of goals. A couple things about it, though, which are mildly irritating, I'm sure, to Tommy Wheeldon Jr. is, and I know it was to Dan Klomp, conceding off a set piece, like a corner kick again, happened, and it just seemed a bit too easy. But overall, they came up with the point.
Yeah, it was a little different from other draws that Cavalry has experienced this year where they went up, they took the lead, and then they surrendered it almost immediately after. This game was a bit different in that Ottawa took the lead quite early, really. Manny Aparicio, who somehow, despite being one of the shortest guys on the pitch, getting on the end of a corner kick in the 5th minute to put Atletico up 1-0. And it really was, it felt exactly like those 2 corner kick goals against Valor that Cavalry conceded a couple of home matches ago. Really frustrating to watch. Ali Musi, he brought Cavalry back into it with a really nice goal. I think just about 10 or so minutes later, curling the ball in from outside the 18-yard box.
It was a stalemate until the beginning of the second half, and then kind of similar to how the first half started, Ottawa came out and took the lead right away.
Yeah, and then Cavalry, similar to the first half, they had to claw their way back into it, and in the 66th minute, they managed to do that thanks to someone who's become a familiar name on the score sheet in recent games. Dan Klomp getting, I believe this was the 5th or 6th goal of the season for him, another header. But we won't see it next match, will we? Dan Klomp, after playing every minute of every game this season, as well as last season, he's suspended because of a accumulation of yellow cards.
Yeah, I think he was pretty disappointed in that. He's pretty proud of that Ironman streak he's had going on.
Yeah, which, Dan Klomp is such an important player for Cavalry FC. I'm curious to see how they do without him, to be honest. The last time Cavalry didn't have Dan Klomp was it must have been in 2022, right? I don't believe he played every minute of that season. So he's just such a stalwart defender. He's so reliable and he's always there. So I am curious to see how Cavalry does when he's not.
Yeah, I expect it's going to be kind of a bit of a unusual lineup from the Cavs standpoint. Sometimes you look at, a guy like Charlie Trafford, for example, who could kind of be that veteran defensive type presence that might even slot in as sort of an emergency center back replacement. Well, he's been injured and it doesn't look like he's going to be coming back. So
yeah, and you know what? He always plays on the wing, but I remain adamant that Bradley Camden is a capable center back. I think he actually plays left back very defensively quite often. And I know he played center back growing up because he was on my team, right? So I think he could slot in there as well. I'm not really sure if Tommy Wheeldon Jr. will go with a back three or back four, but given the numbers, you almost have to expect it to be a back three, don't you?
Well, I think so at this point. Like basically every outfield player they have on the roster, I expect will be dressing for this match. But
we speculated last week about the arrival of Jay Herdman. That came together really quickly, and he actually made his debut for Cavalry against Atletico, getting a couple of minutes towards the end, didn't he?
You couldn't see a lot there. He had a few touches, but I think he's going to play a lot in these last few games. I was sort of contemplating this earlier, and it just seems to me that Jay Herdman playing for Whitecaps 2 very regularly, what would really be the incentive for the Whitecaps to loan him out and even for him to even want to come to Calgary, unless he knew that he was going to get a chance to play and be promised a significant amount of playing time when he comes. So I fully expect these next several games, as long as he's fit, we're going to see a lot of minutes out of him down the stretch.
Yeah, and he would contribute to the U21 minutes, would he not?
Yeah, he would. And considering that Lowell Wright was the prime generator of U21 minutes and is now out, they're still, I think, 300 and some minutes short. Like they're not desperately short, but if they need somebody who's playing regularly to sort of tie that all up, because Nico Moronic hasn't played much lately, and Shannon Chandra hasn't either, and Mile Henry being injured, Lowell Wright being injured, running out of options there. Michael Harms made it into this match after Fraser Aird took a bit of a knock, but yeah, there's not a lot of U20 potential minutes available outside of him right now.
Yeah, and speaking of Harms, I actually I was really impressed with some of his patterns of play against Ottawa. His passes were perfectly weighted. He was calm and composed, much more so than I think his first game of the season, which was the match before this. I really liked how he operated at right back against Ottawa.
So did I. He had energy. He seemed fresh out there. He was, his play was really quite good. I kind of thought the same thing. I thought that that was a pretty solid performance. And, if the opportunity comes up, presuming Fraser Aird doesn't have a significant injury here, and you're hard pressed to take him out of that right back spot. But I was impressed with Harms for sure.
Yeah, and one of the first things that happened, the ball broke into a perfect 50-50, and he committed, right? He went in for the tackle and he won it. And that's something that at the age of 18, to be thrown into a situation where you have to commit like that, I mean, it's commendable. So good on him for his showing against Ottawa. And yeah, like you mentioned, with Cavalry still short of U21 minutes, I'm sure that the young players are going to get their opportunities in these last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, which leads us to the York match Friday, which is probably tonight when you're listening, 6 p.m. Calgary time. Pretty huge matchup considering the teams are neck and neck here. And I don't know, I think if one team or the other gets 3 points, I think that's going to go a long way to keeping them above the other when the table's done.
Oh, absolutely. Right now, you've got York in third place on 36 points, and Cavalry 1 point behind them in fourth place with 35. And then there's a big gap before fifth. And I don't think either team is really worried about not making the postseason. It seems like a lock at this point. But the higher up the table you finish, the easier path to the final you have. So lots of incentive for Cavalry to try and get a win on the road against York this week. Last time Cavalry went to York was it kicked off their winning streak. It was their 2-1 win in mid-August. Maël Henry scored, and then Fraser Aird scored to cancel out a goal from Josue Martinez. Hope Cavalry will be, hoping to replicate that when they go to Toronto.
Hi, this is Aislin Phillips, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Let's move on and talk about U Sports women's soccer, and we'll start with the Dinos. They went up to Edmonton and they pulled out a 3-2 victory over MacEwan. And then the next day they played the University of Alberta and they suffered their first loss of the year, a 2-0 loss.
Yeah, that puts them in second place in the standings with a 3-1 record. We had talked about their emphatic start to the season against the teams from Manitoba the weekend before, and kind of speculated that maybe this Dinos team was going to look pretty unbeatable in the Prairies division. But obviously Alberta proved a tough match for them, and despite outshooting the Pandas, they weren't able to pull out the 3 points, and they now sit in second place in the conference standings with some big games this weekend, including one against the team that's currently in first.
They're going to play University of Regina on Saturday, but then they're going to play University of Saskatchewan on Sunday, which I'd say is the biggest U Sports women's match this weekend in Calgary. It's interesting for a few reasons, obviously a matchup first against second, but the other piece of it too is when you look up and down that Saskatchewan Huskies roster, it is chock full of players with Calgary connections.
Which makes you think there should be a decent crowd out, because the family of those Calgarian players on Saskatchewan will probably still be living in the city and should be able to come, watch their relative play. So should be a good sized crowd at Dinosaur Field. This is intriguing. You've got a team that's 3-1 against a team that is 3-0-1. And the Huskies, the only points they dropped were in their opener against MacEwan, who the Dinos were narrowly able to beat. So it should be a really tight game no matter what way it swings.
Definitely. And I guess this is a good place to segue into our interview this week. We had the chance to catch up with Aislin Phillips a few hours ago.
Yeah, so let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Aislin Phillips to the podcast. Aislin is a new member of the University of Calgary Dinos, but she's from the city, I believe, and before transferring to the U of C, was a member of the UBC Thunderbirds. Aislin, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I mentioned a little bit about your university career there, and we're going to talk about that more later on. But to start, can you kind of give our listeners a rundown of your background, your club career, how you got recruited and became a university soccer player?
So I'm actually from Cochrane, which is just outside of Calgary. Started playing when I was 3 years old, and then I made the jump to Blizzards when I was 13. Had a few coaches, was lucky enough for Diogo to take over my team when I was about 15 or 16. And then from there, I've played with Whitecaps Rex, Team Alberta. At the age of, I think I was still 16 at the time. I might have been freshly 15 or 16. I committed to the University of British Columbia. I got in touch with the head coach through Tops ID camps, mostly in Calgary, and started to build the rapport with him when I was 14. Kept in contact with him, went to like the SX Cup and stuff in Vancouver, and I was lucky enough to commit pretty early.
So you spent 3 seasons with UBC, and now you've transferred over to the Dinos. So how did you end up on this journey, ending up back in your hometown after a few years on the coast?
I was very fortunate enough to win both Canada West and Nationals in my time at UBC. I felt like I had a little more to give than I was kind of given the opportunity at UBC. And I've known Diogo for so many years, and he's been so supportive of me no matter where I've been or what the time was. So I felt like he was always in my corner. So I was very happy to kind of reach out to him and explore my options and make the jump back home.
And it looks like it's been a really good move for you personally, Aislin. I noticed you've been playing a lot this season. You obviously know the coach. You know quite a few of the players as well from League One, I believe. How has it been to integrate into the Dinos camp? And you're in a situation where you're a veteran player, right, in Canada West, but you're also a newcomer. So what has that been like?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky because I'm kind of used to being given a lot of responsibility and stuff, but you never want to overstep coming onto a new team. And I tried to be very careful with just how I approach things. But I think once players started to notice that I was there with the same intention and goals as the rest of them, that's when I kind of started to get the ball rolling and stuff and gain some respect from other players just to know that I want to help them win. And hopefully that's what we keep doing so far.
How has the season been going overall? How do you rate your performance, the team's performance so far?
Yeah, I think we started flying. We scored 18 goals in our first weekend, so that's gotta give us some attention. We had a not perfect performance on the road, but we've got another 2 games at home that I'm really looking forward to. We've got an opportunity to get first place back in the Prairie Division. I'm pretty happy with how I've started the season. Getting lots of minutes, which is exactly what I want to be doing, and helping the team score some goals, hopefully, and keep that rolling with the season.
You scored on a PK, didn't you? Are you the designated PK taker?
I am for right now.
Okay.
Yeah, keep scoring them and you'll stay the PK taker.
Yeah.
We talked a lot this past summer about League One, and it's obviously a new addition to Alberta. It's been in BC for a bit longer, but this is the first university season after the first official League One Alberta season. I want to ask you what you think about, does the arrival of League One really amplify the level of U Sports, and how do the two compare in your eye?
I think League One's been an amazing addition to Alberta soccer. I think if you're not already in university, it's a great preparation for university. If you're in university, it's a great opportunity to keep your touch over the summer and play with girls that are at the same level as you, and being able to play with girls that you were playing with in youth and maybe they went down to the States or play for another university. So being able to come back and work together again is such a privilege, and it's a great opportunity for girls who have graduated university to keep playing. And with the WSL coming in, it's an amazing transition for that as well.
Did notice this year that you did suit up for Foothills when they were playing UWS matches. I think it was the last match against Arizona. How did that all come about?
I think they lost some players due to the NCAA season starting. So Tux reached out to Diogo and asked if I was interested in playing. And I love an opportunity no matter when and where. So being able to kind of play at the next level, I was all for it. And yeah, I was happy to get in and get some minutes. And it was a great opportunity because it was kind of the Wild FC announcement game. So that was really cool.
Speaking of Wild FC and UWS and higher level opportunities, we tend to always ask our interview guests, looking farther into the future, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 or 4 years down the line, what would you say your goals and aspirations are? And maybe on a shorter term, what are your goals for this year?
I like to shoot for the stars, so I'd love to be all Canadian some sort. And then for the year, I'd love to try out for the Wild FC. I think it's a great opportunity, and even if I don't make the team, I'm sure I'll learn a lot just in the process. And then long term, I'd love to play pro, whether it's here. I've started exploring options in Ireland because I have a dual citizenship. But yeah, I definitely want to keep playing soccer past university.
There's been no shortage of Canadians going and playing in Ireland right now at Treaty United. There, even Talia White and Kaylee Box, and so there's definitely a Canadian connection there for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else right now that you just want to add in? Any shout outs or anything else that you want to sort of include and mention before we wrap it up?
I'd say I just wanted to touch base on the fact that like the Dinos have been so welcoming to me because I'm sure it's not easy to add a fourth year onto a team. But yeah, they've been so extremely welcoming. Diogo's been nothing but supportive of me. And I get to play with some awesome players for their last couple of years, like Rachel Barlow and Fia coming back from her injury next year. And I love playing with them in League One, so I'm very excited to be playing with them in Dinos gear now.
Right on. Well, thanks again, Aislin, and congrats on a strong start to the season, and best of luck moving forward with the Dinos. We'll be keeping an eye on how the team does.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks to Aislin for taking the time to do the interview, and I enjoyed her viewpoint about what it was like to be a transfer, going into her fourth year. It's certainly not something that you probably see every day in youth sports.
No, I don't think so. I think by the time you're a third or fourth year player, you're pretty entrenched in your campus, your team, your studies, your program. So it's a pretty big change to make and a big decision. But at least on the pitch, it seems to really be working out for her. She's getting more playing time for the Dinos than she was getting last year for the Thunderbirds. And obviously going from a powerhouse program to a team that wants to be a powerhouse program and is building toward that kind of reputation, it's a bit of a jump, but she obviously is familiar with her teammates thanks to her affiliation with Blizzard and League One Alberta. It seems like she's become a key cog for that team's midfield.
Just to wrap up, U Sports women, Mount Royal played a couple matches last weekend, and they had a loss and a tie. They lost to University of Fraser Valley 2-0, and then they tied Trinity Western. So after these results this week, they're in sixth place in the Pacific Division, so they're a little bit out of the playoff picture at the moment. But they got a couple more matches this weekend, and they're also here in town. So we went from having no games in Calgary to this weekend we're having 4 women's games.
Yeah, feast or famine in terms of your ability to watch local U Sports soccer in Calgary these days. But no, I think they'll welcome being back at home. I don't believe their usual home field is ready yet for hosting games, so I imagine they'll be on that makeshift setup on the adjacent field again. But nonetheless, I'm sure they'll be happy to be in front of their own fans.
For sure. And that's Friday night against UBC Okanagan, and then Saturday evening against Thompson Rivers.
And then I don't know if we mentioned the times for the Dinos games, but they're taking on Regina at 12 p.m. And then that's on Saturday, and then Sunday, the same time, taking on Saskatchewan Huskies.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
When we interviewed Aislin Phillips earlier, she made some comments about the upcoming Northern Super League and about the opportunities it presents. Scott, you and I were chatting earlier this week, and we thought, why don't we do a segment of just us speculating?
Yeah, we were kind of riffing about players that we think could be on the radar of Calgary Wild. As you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we're probably going to start seeing players signings relatively soon. I think we're at the point, if you recall the introduction of the Canadian Premier League back in, the fall of 2018 is when we started seeing Cavalry player signing announcements. So approaching the same time of year, and with the women's team set to debut in, 5 or 6 months from now, I think it's appropriate to start thinking about who's going to be on this team. So you and I came up with 5 players. They're 5 Calgary-based or Calgary native players who we think could be on the radar of the Wild.
In no particular order, let's start off with the first name on the list, and that's Grace Doherty.
Yeah, Grace Doherty, a player we've had on the podcast before. Very successful career with Foothills WFC. And last year, she signed her first professional contract with Braga, went to Portugal, but it didn't really work out for her. And she returned to Calgary after, I think it was around 5 or 6 months, and then finished off the season with Foothills. But her university career is over with the University of Memphis Tigers. So I'm sure she, as she mentioned when you spoke to her for the podcast, is very keen on the idea of playing professionally in her hometown.
Yeah, if you go through the archives, you can find that interview. And yeah, I think she learned a lot in Braga, and she's still very keen to continue her career as a professional. And it just seems like she would be a pretty obvious choice for somebody that could be signed to the Wild or to the Super League in general.
The next player on our list, I think, is also an almost sure thing for playing in the NSL. Another player we've had on the podcast, but it was actually more than a year ago now, Sarah Kinsner.
Sarah has been a stalwart for Foothills and their UWS team over the last several years. And
absolutely. And she has professional experience, but she's one of those cases where I think her career was disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Back when she was on our podcast in, I want to say early-ish 2023, she talked about how she went to Budapest to play with Ferencváros. I think I said that right. And then she ended up having to leave. That was, I think, the start of her pro career, and it was kind of halted by circumstances outside of her control. But if you think back to the event where the Wild were unveiled at McMahon Stadium, she was kind of front and center. She was a big part of that unveiling, and it would make sense if she was honestly the club's first signing, akin to like Nick Ledgerwood for Calgary.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be not a surprise at all. Third person we have on our list is Talia White, another former podcast guest. Talia had a distinguished career with the Dinos, and she's gone on to play pro in Australia, and she spent some time with Treaty United in Ireland this year. And then during the summertime, she came back and finished off the summer with Foothills.
Yeah, she's another logical choice. I think if you think back, she's played pro, and then when we talked to her, she was playing for Treaty United, and she'd been named Treaty's captain despite having just joined the team. So she clearly is headstrong, and she has the pedigree and the experience to step into the NSL as a proven professional. All right, so the fourth player on the list, and I believe the only one on our list that we haven't interviewed, but Mila Schneider, a very important player for the University of Maine, and she's in her senior year. So we'll probably be thinking what's next for her. But she's had a very successful NCAA career and could probably step into the NSL quite handily. Yeah, she started all 19 games for Maine last year. Racked up over 1,600 minutes, went 90 minutes in 15 games, and I believe she was named to the All-Regions second team, as well as the America East All-Conference first team. So she racked up a lot of accolades, and she has one more college season to really show what she can do. But with her ties to Calgary, you have to imagine that whoever is on the Wild coaching staff will be well aware of her.
And the last name on our list of 5 players is the Dinos' Rachel Barlow, another former podcast guest.
Yeah, I feel like every time we interview anybody from the UFC Dinos, including Aislin Phillips today, they bring up Rachel, don't they? So it seems like she's just an absolute critical piece for the Dinos, and she's a leader on that team, isn't she?
All signs would point to continuing on in a professional capacity next year. So she seems like a pretty logical pick for this list.
So those were the 5 we selected, Jason. It was hard to settle on just 5, however. So we also put down some honorable mentions. We could probably throw their names out as well.
I think the first one I'll mention is Kendall Showers, former podcast guest. She led League One Alberta in scoring this past summer, and we would expect to have NSL aspirations.
A few other names we wanted to throw out. She missed most of last year due to injury, but Grace Musala from MacEwan University. She's from Calgary, and we know that she is capable of scoring a lot of goals, isn't she?
Definitely. And I think she is in her 4th year. So she's at the point now where, I think she could come back for another year of eligibility, but yeah, she's at the point where she'll be graduating, and this would fit in for her. And speaking of graduating players, Anderson Williams is another name, which I think on my radar screen a bit. She's she's been a regular with Foothills, and she's one of the captains this year at Texas A&M. Probably known more for its football than its soccer, but I think they've got a pretty serious soccer program down there too. So
Yeah, Giga Maggie. But no, that's just their Giga Maggie is their I don't know what you call it, but it's what the fans all say. But anyway, I have another name I want to throw out there. I don't actually know what she's been up to for the last couple of years, but you may remember Montana Leonard set some scoring records for the Dinos in, I believe, 2021, and then went to pursue a pro career in Australia shortly after that. But I have to confess, I haven't really followed her career since. No, but if she's maintained, like she was a phenom for the Dinos in the 2021 season. I think she set all kinds of scoring records, and if she has maintained, a level of competitive soccer, you'd have to imagine that she would be a viable option.
Hi, this is Miguel Da Rocha, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, so let's segue over to men's soccer at the university level. Dinos and Cougars were in action. Lots of storylines, lots of things to mention. I will mention that MRU's unbeaten streak has come to an end. They lost to Trinity Western.
Heading out to Vancouver, Trinity Western's always a pretty strong team, but they lost 3-1 on Friday night.
So they lost 3-1 to Trinity Western. Interestingly, Calgarian Charles Nana scored in that match for Trinity Western. Skylar Rogers scored MRU's only goal. They followed that up with a win over Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, 3-0, so pretty convincing. But if you look at the standings, they're in third place right now, but they've only compiled 2 wins in their first 7 games, so they're at 2-1-4.
This weekend, they've got a couple matches, and they're going to be playing University of Northern BC, and on Friday, and then on Sunday, they're going to play Victoria, which is actually, they're ranked in the top 10. Currently, Mount Royal's been knocked out of the top 10.
Yeah, so they'll be hoping that home advantage will work in their favor, but really tough games for the Cougars. It's been a tough season for them so far.
Last week for the Dinos, they had a big 6-2 victory. They were playing University of Northern BC on the road, and that's a big win. I think I saw on social media someone made a comment, when was the last time the Dinos scored 6 goals anywhere in BC?
Yeah, and they followed that up with a win over UBC Okanagan as well. And on the Dinos website, it said it marked the first time in program history that the Dinos went to British Columbia and came home with 6 points, which shows how tough it is to take on those teams from BC. I think it also shows how strong this Dinos team is. We talked about their defense last year, but scoring 6 in one game shows that they have some good offensive weapons as well. And it seems like Owen Antoniuk, who we had on the podcast recently, he played another big role, scoring 3 goals and assisting on another one. And he's now actually 3rd in Canada West for goals and 4th for points.
And this week they're playing a couple more BC teams, but here in Calgary, they're going to be playing Thompson Rivers on Saturday and Fraser Valley on Sunday.
Yeah, and they have a lot of success against both of these teams in recent years. They've never lost to the Wolfpack in the 4 matches that they've played them since they joined U Sports. And they've also won their last 4 against Fraser Valley. So I'm sure that with home field advantage and history on their side, I would think that the Dinos are feeling pretty good heading into this weekend.
And last week, we had the ACAC Derby match. We had SAIT against Ambrose, and on both sides of it, SAIT came out victorious. On the women's side, it was an 8-1 victory, and on the men's side, a 3-1 victory. So that puts the men in second place in the South, and the women are first in the South.
Yeah, women are very used to being first in the South. I think they've kind of they held that spot last year. They are the defending champions. They're looking really good, aren't they? They've got a 4-0 record, 21 goals for, 4 against. They followed up their 8-1 win over Ambrose with a 6-1 win over the University of Alberta Augustana. And we talked about how they have a lot of continuity from last year, so they're clearly a good team. I was looking at the scoring leaders, and of course, we talked about Megan Weeb being back. She's chipped in with 4 goals, but another player who's having a really good season is Olivia De Pasquale, who leads the team with 5 goals, which is second in the conference.
Yeah, she's a player that's been around for a few years now. She's a veteran on that team, and
I Googled her because I wanted to learn a bit more, and I was interested to learn that she was previously with the Lethbridge Kodiaks, and she also played with Lethbridge FC last year.
oh, really? Okay, I did not know that. So this upcoming weekend, SAIT's on the road. They're playing in Lethbridge on Saturday, and then Olds on Sunday. So I think most notably on the men's side, it'll be a matchup 1 versus 2.
Yeah, the player that has stuck out from SAIT so far is Brock Mitchell. He's got 5 goals so far this season, including 2 against Ambrose on the weekend.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcasting platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find out other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there, so if you want to buy Scott's book online, it'll connect you. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, such as Twitter or Instagram, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.